Back in 1904, a 26-year-old woman sat at a small wooden desk in Tokyo and wrote something that would quietly change the financial lives of millions of people across the next 12 decades. Her name was Hani Motoko. She was a journalist, the first female journalist in Japan, in fact, and she had just launched a magazine called Jogaku Sekai, a publication aimed at young women navigating modern life. And in one of its earliest issues, she introduced a simple financial system she called Kakeibo. The word itself, written with the characters for household and account book, translates roughly as household financial ledger. But that translation undersells it entirely. What Hani Motoko created wasn't a spreadsheet, it wasn't a budgeting formula. It was a philosophy disguised as a notebook. A way of relating to money that treated every yen that passed through a family's hands as something worthy of attention, awareness, and care. She introduced it specifically to help Japanese women, who, at the time, managed almost all household finances, understand not just where money was going, but why. Not just how much was being spent, but what those spending choices said about the life being built. That was 121 years ago, and the Kakeibo is still in use in Japan today. You can buy a Kakeibo notebook in any bookstore in Tokyo. There are families in which 3 generations of women have kept the practice. There are modern versions adapted into apps, translated into 30 languages, sold in bookstores across Europe and North America. The New York Times has written about it. The BBC has covered it. And yet somehow, most people in the West who are struggling with debt have never heard of it. That's what this video is about. Not a trend, not a hack. A 121-year-old Japanese system that has quietly helped ordinary families live debt-free. Not by earning more, but by understanding their money more deeply than they ever had before. There are 6 principles at the heart of Kakeibo, and each one addresses a different layer of why debt forms in the first place. Let's discover them together. There's something important to understand before we begin. Kakeibo was not designed for wealthy families. It was designed for ordinary ones. Families living on a single income, managing modest households, trying to make ends meet with dignity and intention. Hani Motoko wasn't writing for the rich. She was writing for the woman who needed to know that the money coming in this month was enough to cover what was going out, with something left over for the future. And this is precisely why Kakeibo works where other systems fail. Most modern budgeting tools are designed around data. They track, categorize, and analyze. They show you charts of your spending. They send you notifications when you exceed a limit. They treat money as a math problem. But debt is rarely a math problem. If it were, everyone who understood that spending more than you earn creates debt would simply stop doing it. And yet millions of people who understand this completely, who could explain it to you right now without hesitation, are still carrying debt they cannot seem to reduce. Because debt is not a math problem. It is, more often, a relationship problem. A broken or unconscious or unexamined relationship with money, with desire, with the future, and with yourself. Kakeibo treats it as such. It doesn't just ask where your money went. It asks why. It asks how you feel about it. It asks what you wish you had done differently. And it asks what you plan to change. 4 questions that most budgeting apps have never thought to ask. Let's begin with the first principle. Principle 1. Begin every month with intention, not assumption. Most of us begin a new month the way we end the last one, in motion, without pausing. The calendar flips, the income arrives, the bills go out, the spending resumes. We assume, somewhere in the back of our minds, that this month will be roughly like last month, but maybe a little better. Maybe this month we'll spend less on things we don't need. Maybe this month we'll manage to put something aside. The assumption does all the work, and the intention never quite forms. Kakeibo interrupts this immediately. At the start of every single month, before a single yen is spent, the practitioner sits down and answers 4 questions in writing. How much money do I have available this month? How much do I want to save? How much am I able to spend? And how can I improve compared to last month? That last question is the one that changes everything. Not how much did I spend last month, which is backward-looking and often painful, but how can I improve, which is forward-looking and quietly motivating. It transforms the month ahead into a deliberate experiment rather than a passive drift. Think about the difference between a ship that sets its heading before leaving the harbor versus one that simply leaves and adjusts to wherever the current takes it. Both ships move, both ships travel, but only one arrives where it intended to go. Kakeibo is the setting of the heading, the month is the voyage. This doesn't mean the plan is rigid. Kakeibo has never been about rigid control. That would be entirely contrary to its spirit. It's about awareness, about beginning each month as a conscious actor in your own financial life rather than a passenger in it. Try this. On the first day of next month, before you open a single bill or check a single balance, write down one number, what you want to save this month. Not what you think you can save, what you want to save. That intention, written down, becomes a quiet anchor for every spending decision that follows. Principle 2. Write by hand, not by screen. This is the principle that sounds the most old-fashioned and turns out to be among the most important. Kakeibo is a paper practice. Hani Motoko didn't design it for pencil and paper by accident. She designed it that way because paper was all that existed. But the passage of time has revealed something she may not have fully understood in 1904. The physical act of writing by hand does something to the brain that digital entry simply doesn't replicate. Neuroscientists at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology published research in 2020 confirming that handwriting activates significantly more neural pathways than typing or tapping. Specifically, the pathways associated with memory consolidation and emotional processing. When you write a number by hand, your brain processes it as more real, more significant, more worthy of attention than when you tap the same number into an app. In the context of personal finance, this matters enormously, because the epidemic of modern overspending is partly an epidemic of financial abstraction. Money has become so invisible, a tap here, a card swipe there, a subscription quietly renewing in the background, that our brains genuinely struggle to register it as real. The number on the screen doesn't feel like money. It feels like a number. The pen makes it real. It's like the difference between reading the word cold and plunging your hands into ice water. One is information, the other is experience. When you write down that you spent $47 on food delivery last Thursday, and then write it again under your weekly total, and then see it in your monthly summary, you have experienced that spending 3 times. And 3 experiences leave a mark that one digital notification never will. This is why Kakeibo practitioners consistently report not just better awareness of their spending, but a genuine change in how spending feels, a heightened sensitivity to money leaving that, over time, naturally reduces the frequency of unconscious or impulsive transactions. Try this. This week, keep a small notebook with you, any notebook, and write down every purchase by hand within an hour of making it, just the item and the amount. Do this for 7 days and notice what you feel on day 7 compared to day 1. Principle 3. Categorize spending by feeling, not just by function. Most budgeting systems divide spending into functional categories: groceries, housing, transport, entertainment, utilities. These categories are logical and useful. Kakeibo uses them too, but it adds a second layer that no Western budgeting system has ever quite replicated, and that layer is emotional. In addition to where money went, Kakeibo asks you to note which purchases were necessary, which were wants, which were cultural or social, gifts, celebrations, obligations, and which were unexpected. This 4-category system, necessary, want, culture, unexpected, creates a map not just of your spending behavior, but of the emotional landscape underneath it. Because here's the thing, debt rarely comes from a single source. It doesn't usually form because someone spent too much on groceries. It forms because of the want category that grew quietly for months, and the culture category that felt impossible to control, and the unexpected category that hit 3 times in a row and derailed the whole plan. When you can see these categories separately, month after month, patterns emerge that a single combined number never reveals. A woman who consistently overspends in the culture category might realize she's spending money to maintain relationships in ways that don't actually feel meaningful. A man who watches the want category climb every time a particularly stressful month comes through work might recognize the emotional transaction underneath, the spending as self-soothing, not self-expression. Kakeibo doesn't judge any of this. It simply illuminates it, and what becomes visible can be addressed. What remains invisible continues to drive behavior from underground. Think about a garden with weeds growing below a thick layer of mulch. You can see the mulch, it looks tidy, but the weeds are growing beneath it, unseen, drawing resources, slowly undermining the plants you actually want to flourish. The 4-category system is the act of pulling back the mulch, gently, without drama, just to see what's actually there. But if that changed how you think about where your money goes, the next principle goes even deeper, all the way to the question that most budgets never think to ask. Try this. Look at your last month of spending and try to divide it mentally into these 4 categories. Don't do the math yet. Just notice which category feels the most surprising when you look at it honestly. Principle 4. Ask why, not just how much. This is the principle that separates Kakeibo from every other financial system in existence, and it is the one that Hani Motoko seems to have understood with particular clarity. At the end of each week, the Kakeibo practitioner doesn't just tally totals. She reflects. She asks, why did I spend what I spent? What was I feeling when I made these choices? Was I tired? Was I stressed? Was I trying to reward myself for something difficult? Was I trying to avoid something uncomfortable? This practice predates behavioral economics by about 70 years, the field that studies the psychology of financial decision-making, pioneered by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky in the 1970s, has now thoroughly documented what Hani Motoko seemed to intuit in 1904, that most spending decisions are not rational, they are emotional. They are driven by mood, by stress, by social comparison, by the desire for comfort or novelty or relief. And the only way to change emotionally driven behavior is to first make it conscious. It's like the difference between a habit you know you have and one you don't. If you know that you spend more when you're tired, that the 9 p.m. purchase is almost never one you'd make at 9 a.m., then you have information you can act on. You can create a rule for yourself. No shopping after 8 p.m. Simple, effective, but only possible because you asked why and actually listened to the answer. Kakeibo doesn't require a therapist or a journal of emotions. It requires only this: one honest question per week. Why did I spend what I spent? And then the willingness to sit with the answer long enough to let it be useful. Research from the University of Scranton, published in the Journal of Clinical Psychology, found that people who write reflective notes about their goals alongside tracking progress are 42% more likely to achieve those goals than people who track alone. The reflection isn't a soft addition, it's a structural multiplier. Try this. At the end of this week, look at the 3 largest non-essential purchases you made and write one sentence for each. What were you feeling when you made it? You don't have to share it with anyone. You don't even have to draw conclusions from it yet. Just ask and notice what comes up. Principle 5. Review honestly, not defensively. At the end of each month in the Kakeibo system, there is a review. You compare what you intended to save at the beginning of the month with what you actually saved. You look at where the gaps appeared. You ask what you would do differently. And then, this is the part most people skip when they try to adapt Kakeibo for themselves. You write a short, honest assessment. Not a self-criticism, an assessment. The same tone you would use if you were reviewing someone else's month with warmth and genuine curiosity. Most of us have a deeply avoidant relationship with our own financial reality. We don't open the statements, we don't add up the totals. We look away because looking directly feels like confrontation, like the numbers will reveal something damning about who we are. But Kakeibo treats the monthly review not as a verdict, but as a conversation. A conversation between who you intended to be financially this month and who you actually were. Between the plan and the life. And like all good conversations, the goal is not to win. The goal is to understand. There's a Japanese concept called hansei, which means reflection, but carries within it the nuance of acknowledgement without shame. To hansei is to look clearly at what happened, accept it without distortion, and use it to inform what comes next. It is the opposite of both denial and self-punishment. It is honest, practical, and ultimately kind. Families that practice Kakeibo across generations develop something remarkable over time. A financial self-knowledge that compounds. Each month's review adds to the previous one. Patterns become clear not just across weeks, but across years. You begin to understand your own financial rhythms, the months that are consistently harder, the categories that consistently surprise you, the seasons where your intentions and your actions tend to drift apart. And with that understanding comes the ability to plan, not just for the ideal month, but for the real one. Try this. At the end of this month, give your finances a 10-minute review, not with dread, with curiosity. Ask just one question. What did I learn about myself and my money this month that I didn't know at the beginning of it? Principle 6. Save for something real. This is the final principle, and in some ways the quietest one, but it may be the most important for anyone who has ever tried to save and failed to sustain it. Kakeibo doesn't just ask how much you want to save. It asks what you're saving for. And it asks that you write it down alongside the number. This might seem small. It is not. Behavioral economists call this goal specification, the difference between an abstract intention and a concrete, visualizable destination. Research from the Dominican University of California found that people who wrote down not just their goals, but the specific details of what achieving that goal would look like, were significantly more likely to achieve them than those who held the goal only in their minds. In Kakeibo, the savings goal is always attached to something real. Not, I want to save more money, but I want to save 14,000 yen this month so that by October I have enough for the car repair without using credit. Not, I should probably build an emergency fund, but I am building a floor of 3 months of expenses so that losing a week of work doesn't mean losing sleep. When saving is abstract, it competes with every concrete desire in your life, and concrete desires almost always win. When saving is concrete, it becomes a desire itself. It has a face, a purpose, a date. It becomes something you are moving toward, not something you are sacrificing for. Think about the difference between giving up chocolate because you should eat better versus giving it up because you're training for a race you registered for, paid the entry fee for, and told your friends about. Both involve the same behavioral change, but one has weight and one has gravity. Kakeibo gives your savings gravity. This is why, across 121 years and countless economic disruptions, wars, recessions, natural disasters, a global pandemic, the Kakeibo system has remained not just relevant, but beloved in Japan. Because it never asks you to be more disciplined than you are. It asks you to be more intentional than you currently are. And intention, attached to something real, is a far more sustainable engine than discipline. Try this. Write down what you are saving for right now. Not what you should be saving for. What you genuinely want to build toward, even if it seems modest or distant. Give your savings a name, a purpose, a why that belongs specifically to you. Now, after all 6 principles, something becomes clear that wasn't quite visible when we started. Kakeibo is not primarily a system for managing money. It is a system for managing attention. The attention you pay to what you spend. The attention you pay to why you spend it. The attention you give to your own patterns, your own emotional landscape, your own quietly held hopes for the future. What creates debt, more often than not, is not a lack of income. It is a lack of attention. Money flowing out invisibly, decisions made reflexively, months passing without reflection, patterns forming underground and never examined until they've become too heavy to easily lift. Kakeibo is the practice of reversing all of that, slowly, without drama. 1 month, 1 week, 1 written entry at a time. Hani Motoko understood something in 1904 that the entire financial technology industry has been slowly, expensively rediscovering for the last 20 years. That the most powerful financial tool is not an algorithm, it is awareness. And awareness requires only a pen, a notebook, and the willingness to look honestly at what is already there. The debt-free life that millions of Japanese families have built across generations wasn't built through restriction. It was built through relationship. A steady, honest, curious, compassionate relationship with the money moving through their lives. And that relationship is available to anyone willing to begin it. You don't need to do all 6 principles at once. You need only 1 to start. Because the Kakeibo isn't asking for perfection. It is asking for presence. And presence, as it turns out, is enough. What about you? Which of these 6 Kakeibo principles felt like something you'd been missing? Something that, if it had a name, you might have started practicing years ago? I'd love to hear it in the comments. These conversations matter. If you found something useful here, or just felt a little more at peace about your finances than you did 12 minutes ago, this channel is where that kind of content lives, every week. Slow, grounded, genuinely useful ideas drawn from Japanese culture and applied to the real problems most of us are quietly carrying. If that's a space you want to return to, subscribing means you'll be here when the next one arrives. And we have a lot more ground to cover together.